Hello, I'm Sandi Conrad. I'm an advisory fellow with Infotech Research Group, and today we're talking about Enterprise Service Management, or ESM. And I'm here with Andrew Graff, Chief Product Officer, and Kaylee Belda, AVP of Pre-Sales, both from Team Dynamics. They will discuss how ESM is enabled for their clients and provide a short demo at the end so you can see Team Dynamics at work. And we'll have a couple of quick polls throughout to see what everyone's doing. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll take a few minutes at the end to answer as many questions as we can. And in case anyone would like to share with colleagues who couldn't make it today, we'll send out a recording afterwards as well. So let's start with the definition of enterprise service management. ESM, or enterprise service management, is a holistic view of services within an entire organization with a focus on improving outcomes. So ESM provides the means to move forward with the goal of digital transformation and enables any department in the organization to create a formal service management process, which uses the same principles and capabilities as IT service management. Several times in my nearly 15-year career at Infotech, my colleagues and have been asked many times about reducing the reliance on email and reducing the volume. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here on this webinar who gets more email in a day than can be reasonably processed. And for years, we've had people trying to find a better way to manage their work. And today we still see a lot of departments who are running their workloads primarily through email, shared drives, and spreadsheets. And enterprise service management is designed really to change that. When we look at the enterprise, across the enterprise to other groups such as HR, marketing, legal, or facilities, we often find that these groups each have their own tools for managing requests, and that some are still very much taking requests via Teams or Slack, email, or even in meetings or hallway conversations. So what we want to talk about is how the service management framework can help and how you can bring that across the enterprise and do it in such a way that the groups are each empowered and not relying on IT for routine system support, admin, or expansion into other services. So we have three types of people using the ESM tools: the service owners, service providers, and service consumers. With ESM, service owners and providers will find themselves working differently and more efficiently. They'll be able to more easily job share and improve services. They'll see a number of benefits, such as improved visibility to workloads. So nothing will be lost in email, and work orders or requests will be queued up and closed as they're completed. The departments will be able to collaborate as well much more easily and be able to see how their workflows impact each other on the value chain. In one of my earlier jobs, where I was asked to bring a new product line into the organization, it required a different model, operating model than the one that was in use for the other product lines. So I worked with the COO to map all my processes, and then we worked with the other teams who aligned to what I was doing. And in the exercise to see how things lined up, several opportunities for improvement in existing processes were discovered, and that's likely to happen for you as well. And this sets the stage to make it easier to add services, make needed adjustments to the operating model. And all of that wouldn't have happened had we not been in the room together looking at those end-to-end workflows. So it's really valuable if you're looking to make any kind of improvements. Now, in an Information Week report on state of IT team resource drain, 59% of organizations said that their technicians spent more than 5 hours a week fulfilling repetitive requests from the business. And I suspect that every department in every organization has similar statistics. As an in-depth review of any complex workflow would identify those opportunities to streamline and automate parts or all of the administrative work of moving data and information to complete the jobs. And by understanding how that work is done, how much time is actually spent on it, and where the most valuable parts of the work are, it becomes possible to improve those outcomes, which may include fewer errors, fewer delayed or lost requests, and may allow for better cross-training of delivery personnel. It can also help you to eliminate task management through email and spreadsheets, which is really valuable. So working in email, as many of you know, is difficult at the best of times. And spreadsheets are fragile process documents where many people are working together in them. It's easy for data to get corrupted or overwritten and for multiple versions to exist. And it may be difficult to then have faith in that information as it's a manual record that can't even be audited. And from a leadership perspective, effective resource management is really only possible with good data to have that visibility into the workload and intake patterns. And enterprise service management can provide all of these benefits. Now, of course, it's not just about the service providers. We also want to make sure that customers see something as well. So those service customers will see immediate benefits to enterprise service management, and especially if the organizations are large, they're complex, or they have a lot of organizational movement where responsibilities regularly shift. One service portal for the organization would allow users to quickly find what they need, regardless of whether they're looking for IT services, HR services, or others. And quick access to documents, FAQs, requests, and more through self-service would provide that instant access for your service consumers. And every document emailed to a user today could be posted in self-serve or could be turned into a form. And the forms from the external providers could also be posted for download. But for internal use, the forms could actually move the data directly into the appropriate system to launch processes or update records. So it can really change how people are working. And that need for the swivel chair middleware, meaning that a person is manually typing in information from one system to another, will become unnecessary. Now, it doesn't mean that the work or that the person won't be needed, but it may change their role a little bit. So now they're validating information and requests, and they're improving or evolving the service and providing better customer service. They'll gain access to the right resources. Your users will gain access to the right resources as they need them. So common scenario, I'm sure everyone has can relate to this in some way. You've got Diane that manages the benefits program. She goes on leave. Dave in payroll won the lottery and he left the company. Nadia in accounting has been promoted. None of that really matters from the consumer perspective because the customer will go to the same portal, they'll fill out the request, it'll launch a process regardless of who's working behind the scenes. And the service owner can then make any changes in the background without negatively impacting the customer. And then, as I mentioned, my earlier example of reworking many connected operating models, a process can be dramatically improved by connecting the dots, having the system do the administrative work of creating the tasks and assigning that work, and even automatically sending reminders. Multi-department processes can be improved, sometimes quite dramatically, and nothing is lost in the email inbox. And the work orders and requests, of course, will be resolved on time and possibly even faster. Now, I do want to address the numbers on the right. So 66% of department stakeholders who are using enterprise service management tools at the time that this survey was done, 66% were overwhelmingly positive regarding their ESM solutions. 16% were negative or overwhelmingly negative, and only 18% just felt it was too early to have opinions. Now, that unhappiness doesn't necessarily mean that the solution, the idea of the solution is a problem. It could actually stem from the fact that they're not getting as much value as they expected. Maybe they don't have the right governance. They might not have the right resources or support to get it off the ground. Lack of expertise, or it could even be the tool that they're using isn't as configurable as it needs to be. One of the things that was mentioned in this report that contributed to dissatisfaction was chargebacks and billing. And that's something that probably shouldn't be part of a rollout. So that has a whole separate project that includes a phased approach, organizational change management, lots of communications and negotiations. So that's good to do as a separate one so that you're not kind of clouding, what are they unhappy with? Is it the ESM or the chargebacks? And that could be a heavy contributor. Now we've got a chart here that shows clearly where some departments are more likely to have embraced enterprise service management. And some of these will be a little bit more obvious. Okay, operations, sure. Facilities, yeah, makes sense. But there's some other groups here that have also adopted it and are getting some real benefits from it. So I'm going to call on Andrew here to maybe talk through a little bit of this as well. So does this type of information line up to your clients? And what are your thoughts on the opportunities for these different types of users or service providers?
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting. If you look at the totality of the colors, right? The vast majority of these non-IT organizations are thinking about how do we improve how we serve our internal and external customers, and that's unsurprising. From our perspective and what we see across our customer base, human resources is typically the first non-IT group to go live, mostly because they're such a service-oriented organization already. IT may have built some systems, they may have a small best of breed tool that's a little bit older, but the value proposition of enterprise service management resonates really quickly with them. And so that's typically the first group that we see, but all of these are common. We also see procurement a lot. So one not listed here, questions about buying processes, following up on POs, et cetera. That's something we see too, but this does not surprise me at all, actually.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that some of these departments who have just so many things coming from so many different directions would massively benefit from getting that organized.
I will say if you look at this diagram, it's a good profile of the averages, right? But I will say most organizations can identify the best places to start by the departments that have the most pain. They're using email, they're using spreadsheets. They're notorious for dropping the ball because people don't follow up because the mechanisms don't support proper workflows, reminders, et cetera.
Mm.
So, if you're looking at your own organization, what I would suggest is, look at your own experience with some of the departments that serve you, right? And
Mm.
listen to their team members, look at the tools they have. And typically, you know, uh, a great way to start with where there's the most pain. And it's a question we get all the time is where should we start this ESM journey? And my observation of the customers who approached it the best way, they start with the department that has the most recognized need. The people within the department and whoever they serve would both say this should be better, this could be better, right?
Mhm.
They're more it's more easy to convince them and show them a better way, and then that can start building momentum.
Mhm. And once everybody sees how good it is, and they all want it, right?
People don't want to be left behind after enough momentum builds. Yeah,
Right? Why do my friends get to be awesome and I can't be, right?
it's peculiarity of human nature. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and I'm going to cover a couple of things from a process standpoint throughout here as well. Because I think, as you're working through all of those different areas, you definitely want to think about those elements that have to be in place to be effective. And so we've got these five here: governance, culture, people, capabilities, and technology. And while maturing each of these elements is going to be critical to success, you don't have to be fully mature to start. Um, Building this out is part of the maturity process. So I'm going to take you through a few different points in each area. With the first one being governance, which is critical. Enabling enterprise service management can start as a grassroots project, but ultimately what it needs is support from the top. The C-suite needs to understand what value you're trying to drive and create that service vision for the organization. And you'll need a champion to lead this to actually become that service organization. So you want to communicate the benefits of ESM and the service vision to the business. You want to be able to make it personal for everyone, identifying use cases and opportunities to streamline processes and improve those services within the organization, and highlight any that fall directly into the strategic plan, because that's always a good way to get a win. And then support each team in identifying those quick wins. And as Andrew mentioned, if you can find those pain points, that's a real benefit to getting this moving quickly and seeing the value. But also think about that longer term roadmap. And then most critically, make sure you're funding the initiative. It's important to have the right tools and the resources available in order to do that. And then encourage that continual improvement and innovation. And I'm going to actually start with our first poll here, and then we can talk a little bit more about these results. So we want to know, where are you in your ESM journey? So we've not started, we've expanded to 1 to 2 groups, we've expanded to 3 to 4, or 3 to 5. We're fully on our way with more than 5 groups, or we are ESM gurus. And so we'll give you just a moment to be able to um, fill that in for yourselves. We can see where things are at.
Sandy, as we're waiting and watching people fill this out, one thing that's also an indicator that there's opportunity is if IT is spending an inordinate amount of time maintaining the systems that help support service management for these other departments. It's, web forms they've built or little applications. That's another great, great way to get
Mhm.
started. Like, how do we save IT time as well, which I think is a big consideration with ESM deployments is how do we not, how do we avoid all of the admin and operational burden for this? How do we avoid
Mhm.
it rolling back onto IT?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's that can be quite painful if you're not, if you've got all these great ideas and you can't actually move with them. So that's a great point. Um, Now I'm not sure what's happening with the poll. I'm not. Oh, there we go. There's some results. So what we're seeing is 48% have not started, 32% have are in that first group that has expanded out to 1 to 2 groups. 8% have the three to five groups, and then 12 are fully on their way. And we don't have any ESM gurus yet, but hopefully we can get some with this journey. So, what are your thoughts on where people are at with this, Andrew?
It's interesting. We obviously have a lot of people on the early end of the spectrum, and I'm really glad they're here because I think there's a lot to be gained from the content you're and research you've been doing and the content we're presenting. You know, I think I think that that's encouraging. If everyone was ESM gurus on the call, we'd probably be sitting here saying, okay, what else should we talk about, right? Maybe you already know all these things, but I think there's a lot. I like it that we're more heavily weighted towards the bottomness, and that's not uncommon. That the initial group or two are usually faster, and then it takes a while for it to trickle through the organization.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, and you're right. I mean, some of these areas take a little bit of time to kind of get into a routine to say like, what are we doing? How do we want to run this? So it does take some time. So that's great. So thanks everyone for filling that out. We'll have more as we go along. So I'm going to jump into a couple more of these areas. So culture is certainly another area that's really important to understand and manage that change around it. So if your culture is full of skeptics from past efforts that were unsuccessful or they fear change, you're going to have to ensure the right messaging surrounds this change in practice. You need to encourage everyone to think about their jobs and tasks as part of a service and their roles as service providers, and that's beneficial regardless of what stage you're in, to really get everyone to understand that we're all providing services. Regardless of who their customer is, you're still providing a service. So identify those services delivered by multiple teams and or departments, and draw the customer journey map to see what that customer service or customer perspective looks like. Then you want to work with the team or the department that's ready for that change, that is feeling those pain points, and then look for those opportunities to solve those pressing problems, reduce complaints and to meet team and organizational goals. And then as you continue to see success, you'll want to move from that team or departmental focus to one that improves services throughout the business. And that can lead to improved services externally as well with the way that your organization serves your customers. And it is also possible for your organization to improve operations so much that they actually have time for innovation and could become industry leaders or disruptors. And people, so important here. There are people in your organization right now who are ready for change. You need to find them, encourage them to bring forward their ideas. And it doesn't really matter initially if their ideas are specifically for solving problems within their role or their department or as part of a big multi-department service. What's important is that you've got people excited about problem solving and innovation. So encourage that excitement. And I realize that you can't just tell people to set aside all their work to innovate. It'd be great if we could, but we can't. But giving them that time to actually work together and with your enterprise service management leader may actually result in some found time. So many companies use the 70-20-10 rule for innovation, where 70% of time is spent on those core activities, 20% is spent on adjacent or expansion activities, and 10% is spent on innovation. And so you can do a lot even with that small amount of dedicated time. Now, you can't solve any of these problems in a vacuum. So you do need to encourage new ways of thinking, bringing people together to collaborate. And even more importantly is that that success can draw more people in. So as we were just talking about, the more people see, the more they want to be a part of it. And you want them to start thinking about how they manage and deliver their services. And that can be a real launching point to creating an innovation culture. So then as you start to look at opportunities, you need to prioritize based on value and effort. So that still becomes part of the process. You want to start with a series of maybe small innovations within a team, or you might want to tackle like a really big, gnarly problem that spans multiple departments first and multiple teams, so that everybody will see like one really big thing has been fixed. Let's see what we can do with the smaller ones. But learn from those any mistakes that happen, because there will be some. And if you're analyzing these existing processes step by step and you're understanding where they actually intersect with each other, then those mistakes may be minimal and probably quick to fix. And then a really big part, celebrate the wins and tell everyone about your successes, and that will really help to drive the next project. Now, capabilities are where the buy-in becomes really important. You do need to make sure that you've got the resources who can identify opportunities within those various departments and value streams. And you'll need to have resources available within IT to support these efforts. So even though we did talk earlier about the fact that we don't want this to be a big burden for IT, there is still going to be some support needed. So you want to find that right balance. And so we often start with service management. The service management process was standardizing IT operations. We look to improve processes and performance for the business. And then as we move into that enterprise service management way of thinking, we then look at not just how IT is providing value to the business, but how the business is providing value to the business. So each department is a service provider to someone, whether those are internal customers or external. And as we continue to move across in an integrated way of working, you'll see that value continually created across many different systems. Now, I also want to point out, I am often asked, how do we get buy-in for these internal projects when there's bigger projects afoot, such as upgrading manufacturing equipment or client-facing services? And if you have services that are inefficient and painful for internal people, so for example, you may have a salesperson who spends a full day working through their expense reports. If they're doing that, do you think they're selling? Do you think they're bringing in revenue? They're probably not, right? So there's a cost to those bad internal processes, and that's usually in lost productivity and employee engagement. So prioritize those areas that could provide that high value in a short term. Define the desired outcome and assess how things are done today. Perform a gap analysis, identify repetitive work, because that repetitive work is a really good one to get rid of. Look at the difficult steps, look at the bottlenecks, communications problems, and any cross-departmental issues. So this is going to highlight where the solutions need to be built, where they need to be improved, and where they need to be integrated with existing tools such as your HRIS system. And you could start with a capability map for each department, which I'll show an example in a couple of minutes. And it doesn't have to be complete to get started, but it is helpful for people departmentally to see where they're creating value and delivering services. And if those services are mapped out, it's also easier for them to identify where there's opportunity for improvement. I'm going to hold off on talking about the fifth element, which is technology, because I want to go back to Andrew. Feel free, Andrew, to comment on anything I've said so far, but I also want you to talk about those two customers that have been doing this, that have successfully built their ESM practices.
Yeah, we have so many customers who I think have done a great job, and I want to point to a few of them. So the first is Casino Arizona. So hospitality, gaming, right? Very complex needs. They have needs around housing, events, IT. You could imagine, especially with IT, these casinos, the lifeblood of a casino and hospitality organization. So, what they've done is really built the processes into the platform to support everything I mentioned. So how they prepare for the big events, right? There's a series of templated steps and workflows to make sure that happens on time. Exception reporting, SLAs, right? That's a huge part of their business. And also with housekeeping, making sure everything's ready, prepared, et cetera, if there are any issues. So it's been really interesting to watch them figure out where that value was. And it really covers most areas of the casino, right? If there's a problem with something, it gets reported, it gets escalated automatically. So really, really impressive what they've done.
Nice. And let me flip to the next one here.
So San Francisco Health Plan, again, really, really interesting. So great with IT, but again, what they realized was all of the incredible complexity of service provided in a healthcare system, right? And in their organization. So you could imagine all the moving parts, everyone sitting at the desks, right? All the different services provided throughout the organization. And once again, I think they did a really good job of looking at where where can we add value fast to build momentum? Where do we feel the most pain internally and externally? So starting with self-service, right, making that a better experience, but then when services needed to be provided by somebody, right, streamlining those workflows. So again, I think it's an exceptional example of thinking holistically about how you serve your internal and external customers.
Mhm. Fantastic. And healthcare is always looking for ways to improve that. So that's great. We want to look at technology as well. This is a major factor in your success. So you want to make sure that the technology is fit for purpose. This is really hard to do if you don't have the right solution in place. So, um, as we start to work through this, you do need to look at, is it a perfect fit? Does it need to actually integrate into other solutions as well? And an ITSM solution that supports ESM with low and no code functionality is going to be key to success. So that low and no code platform would be used to create the service tools, integrate with other solutions in the value stream, and to create content. And the business can have their own tool and their content administrator, which relies on IT then to provide any additional support they need. And they will, of course, have that availability to support each, or IT will have that ability to support each of those tool administrators. Now, without the ability to have that department specific workflow, form, fields, and nomenclature, the business won't really be satisfied with the solution. So they want to filter out other departments' tickets. They don't want to see them. And in some cases, it would be highly problematic, such as with HR or finance or other departments, to have access to that data. So all departments need to be assured that their information can be secured. Now, many of the things that we've talked about would benefit from a virtual assistant or chatbot at the front end for users, but with generative AI, we'll see dramatic improvements in searchability and how people experience connection through that chat function. And you can see some stats down on the right side that show that many organizations who are doing ESM but are actually struggling because they don't have the right tools in place. And I'll remind you that this is a really big opportunity for digital transformation. So for anyone who has digital transformation as a mandate, you'll want to look at how you're doing this today. As you'll see on the maturity scale, AI will help to become autonomous in launching processor tasks, move data, or help with data collection and analysis. And that will be a major enhancement to the way that people work in the near future. Now, defining the service catalog does take some effort, and it often takes a few iterations. So you have to also be patient with the process. So we saw a lot of people with the, 1 to 2 um, um, departments that they're working with right now that will expand and it will get easier as you're supporting them. But depending on the departments, some may actually have a capability map and services really well defined. But it's more likely that if they're just starting on this journey, that it's going to be a combined list of services and tasks. So they'll have to start building that out. But I am going to show you an example of how you can start to think about these services by jumping into an HR scenario that we're all familiar with. So this is an HR capability map. I've pulled this from our sister company, McLean and Company. And if you're thinking that this is kind of intimidating, it looks like a lot of work to build. Yes, it is. But stay with me. So if you have this, that's great. If you don't, you can still start with a smaller subset of services that could be much more easily defined. And a fully defined capability map can also be a work in progress. That it's not something you can just build in a few minutes. But this really demonstrates the opportunity for the ongoing process improvement efforts. And within these capabilities, we can further break down this list. We would normally group capabilities together by team and then by job. but we're not going to do that today because that's not the point of this. But we will jump to a specific use case or service that most people are familiar with. And we will see as they may actually see this as an opportunity for improvement already within their organization. So the service is onboarding. It's complicated. Each department that's involved is often disconnected from the others in this process. Offboarding is also complex. It'd be a variation on this process. But as you can see, I've grayed out anything that's not directly to onboarding, which does simplify the thought process a little bit. But you can see how many groups are still connected to this process just in HR. So we're going to walk through a very simplified visual of an onboarding service, but it can be used to illustrate how many teams are actually involved when a new hire joins the organization. So you'll see the capabilities listed at the top for HR and security, IT, and facilities, and the onboarding activities within the organization and the employee experience. So I'm going to walk through this. We're looking for a new employee. We've got candidate sourcing, selection, and compensation all working together to search out the right person and give them an offer, and that candidate accepts that offer. Now they fill in their payroll forms, their benefits forms, they read and sign all of the policies. The record is created in HRIS, quite often leading into this. The order varies with an organization. So we're now involving the HR policies and payroll and benefits. So they're all signed into all of those things. Now we go to security, who sets up the employee accounts. Then we go to IT, who sets up the equipment and the software. And that in itself may be a multi-step process. Facility will set up the employee workstation. Now we go back to the employee going to security to pick up their badge, which is assigned out by security. And then facilities sets up parking, and the employee picks up their parking pass and maybe finds their desk and maybe moves their vehicle. And then they go back to IT to get their computer, their ID, and their IT orientation. Then we go back to the learning and development group, the health and safety, compliance training, and the employee actually starts their training. They get some orientation, and then they meet with their boss and get their additional orientation and expectations set. And performance management may be involved in this now. Now we also start that role-based training. And so there may be some additional work there with orientation from the team. And in the end, they may receive an onboarding and engagement survey as well. So there's a lot of different pieces, and this is simplified. So within this journey, there's a lot of places where those capabilities are outside of HR. Their timing and quality really matters to the overall employee experience. And many of these right now are separate processes. Some are quite complicated. They may include manual steps. They rely on disconnected forms, possibly multiple phone calls or emails. And having just a couple of delays in requesting tasks can also have a real domino effect. This process could be a smooth, partially automated process, which is a great experience for the service providers and employees, or can be incredibly painful for everyone. And that enterprise service management can simplify all of these steps and connect all of these steps in the process. And then at any time, the process owner or the new person's boss can actually see what's happening and access reports on this entire process. So can be a lot of fun to build this out. So I'm going to jump into another poll here. We want to look at what the biggest obstacles for ESM deployment is across all teams. And so we want to get your thoughts on what's happening there. Are you fully deployed? Are you getting buy-in from the various teams? Are you limited with your ITSM platform? Do you find that admin is cumbersome and maybe a resource drain on IT, or it's time consuming to deploy? I think we've got multiple choice here. So let us know all of your pain, and we can talk through that. And Andrew, do you get a lot of as you're talking to clients, do you get a lot of them coming in with these complaints right off the bat, or are those some things that they're just like, I don't know what's going on, we just need help?
Well, I would say for our customers, right, if it's a potential customer, it's usually a limitation of the system, or the second from the bottom, just too much burden, right, on IT. You know, it's valuable. Another group wants to roll it out, but the concept of taking on something else for IT and maintaining it and caring for it is too much. That's probably the one that we hear from customers the most. Hey, before we wanted to do this, but we don't need another system and a bunch of processes to manage. So you know, that's one of the things we really focus on as an organization is making it easy to allow the departments to do their own management and building and care and feeding of that that application. But I think that that's a huge issue.
Absolutely. Oh, so uh, yeah, the numbers here echo exactly what you're saying there. We've got, 55% say they're getting buy-in from the various teams, which is, or are challenged in getting buy-in from the various teams. So that's a big one, right? Nobody wants to take the time to really examine and get ready for that. They've got limitations, so 15%, cumbersome admin, 40%, pretty high number, and then time consuming to deploy is 40%. So yeah.
And on that point of gaining buy-in, we talked a little bit earlier about our observation of our best clients who focus on where the most pain is. Another
Mhm.
tool that we've seen clients use really well in our platforms, a no-code platform to configure, is it's pretty easy to spin up a prototype. So say, hey, we want HR has a pain. They're up to here with things to do, so they're not, you know, they're not focused on a solution to it. But what we can do is very quickly create a mock application for HR where it has all of their terminology, right? Use the terminology they use in their spreadsheets or the other tools, mock it up very quickly and give them a quick demo and say, hey, do you think this looks right? We just spun this thing up pretty quickly to show you. And that sometimes gets them to pause and say, you did this pretty easily. That looks interesting. You can start that conversation. So that's just, it doesn't have to be HR, but um,
Yeah.
if you're looking at that, sometimes if you can quickly prototype an application that has, you know, their terminology and verbiage and maybe a workflow, right? Maybe a full, you know, you put together one of their simple workflows and
Mhm.
demonstrate how work can flow through it. That can be helpful.
Yeah, actually, that's a great way to drive excitement, right? Is say, hey, we
Yeah.
think we might be able to help you solve this problem. Here's our first draft. Um, yeah, that can make a huge difference in the way that they look at it as well. So I think I've got some additional information here. Looking at platform difficulties. So what we've seen in some of the surveys, it's not easy to do enterprise service management if you don't have the right tools. We've got some examples of challenges that prevent people from fully embracing enterprise service management. And ideally, you want your tools to have that ability to support the departmental needs, regardless of which department is using ESM. And that terminology is one of the areas that is really important. People don't think of their work as incidents and service requests in a lot of cases. So getting the right, case management, work orders, whatever it is that they're called, you want to make sure that you've got that flexibility. And if you're in that position where you're going to be looking at ESM enabling solutions, remember it's not just about low code or no code, although that's super important, but you also want to make sure it's, that they're user friendly. IT is not going to be able to support every change, especially once you start rolling it out in volume. The tools need to segregate that data within the organization while still allowing workflows that cross departments. And the departments need to have that operational support and coaching. They need to have that capability to run with the changes as they're ready for them. And keep in mind that you still need to have some governance in place to make sure that the changes, especially those ones that are cross-departmental, are not being negatively impacted with changes that are made through that process. So there needs to be that view into, what touches other departments so that you don't make changes that break other processes. I have, I think, one more poll here. And we want to look at, does your ITSM solution support the enterprise service management that allows you to build a robust ESM practice? So we've got three options. No, sadly we don't, but we want to make the case. No, but we're looking at new tools. Yes, but it's not as robust as we'd like. And yes, we are so excited about using it to its fullest potential. And then after this, we will have a little bit of a talk about the products that you may be here to see as well. So, but we'll give you just a moment here to to look at these options. And I know I do talk to some clients who say, yeah, we've got the tools, but they're really not working for us. And it's really tough sometimes to make the case when you can say, well, we have a tool, but it doesn't work. So, that's certainly something that we can always assist with as well. If that's, if you're looking to talk to Team Dynamics about that, or myself, there's things that we can talk through on that side of things. So let's see, we've got 7 that want to make the case. We've got 29% that are looking at new tools, 14% that have something, but it's not quite as robust, and 50%. So excited. That's great to see. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think uh, returning back to something you said that I believe is really important when you're thinking about these solutions, right, that are going to support enterprise service management. A good litmus test is to make sure that it's not something IT is just going to have to own. Now, of course, IT can decide to own anything, but you want to have the option of allowing the departments to own it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Is forms and workflows. So say, hey, you want to make a change, you want to add a field to this form. Let's walk through that and see how easy it is for them, right? That's a great litmus test. Hey, let's build a workflow with a couple decisions, points, et cetera. Have them build that workflow.
Yeah.
Right, because just because it says no code, that does not mean it's going to be easy necessarily for someone to understand. So I think that to me, that's an easy way to see do we think the solution will help our team members, our non-IT team members support themselves.
Mhm. Great, great. Now we are, since we are here with Team Dynamics, we want to be able to show you a little bit about how the solution can enable enterprise service management. So, Andrew, I'm just going to have you explain a
Yeah.
little bit about this, and then you can pass things over to Kaylee.
Yeah, just to give you a background, what we'll try to do with this look at the product is take some of the points Sandy's made, some of the conversation topics, and give you a visual on it. And I think that's what's important. And, when you think about enterprise service management, platform has to be able to support the different departments in their own terms, right? Their own language, their own workflows, yet allow collaboration. Self-service is critical to this, including AI capabilities around conversational AI and AI capabilities around automation. And then automation is critical as well. So think about all those systems in your ecosystem that support the different processes for these non-IT departments. It's usually hundreds of applications. So looking for a platform that allows you to build in some of those automations because it saves time and also can increase customer satisfaction if they don't have to wait for things, right? So with that, I'm gonna hand this over to my colleague Kaylee, and she's going to again hopefully give you a visual on some of the concepts that we've talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Sandy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and give you some visuals of how that looks specifically within Team Dynamics. So we have talked about really kind of every facet of enterprise service management. And where I like to start giving people a first look is what that can be like for the end users that you're supporting across the enterprise. And there's a variety of ways that we allow entry points into them submitting tickets, asking questions, looking at documentation. But one of the most major ways that we see our customers utilizing our tool is through what we call our client portal. And what you'll notice here in this example is very common for our customers, where they'll have a single portal. They love to call it, something to the effect of one-stop shop, where all of their end users, employees, those that they're supporting can come to one place to be able to ask their questions, submit their requests, or put their tickets in. And so oftentimes we'll see a generalized homepage like you see here that in Team Dynamics is highly configurable and inaccessible from any type of device, and is built on that accessible compliance standards as well. Now, when we think about that perspective of enterprise service management, what's important is to also be able to have, like we've mentioned, their own nomenclature, their own language and information. And so what we'll also see our customers do is even create landing pages that are specific to departments that can provide extra information or even links to other areas, whether that be internally to Team Dynamics or externally to resources that they might have. What's nice about having the option to do the one-stop shop is that through our rich visibility and permissions, you can determine exactly who can see types of services and also who can see types of internal documentation within your knowledge base as well. Now, we talk to some groups that say, hey, we have the need for a one-stop shop, but there are some groups where it makes sense, where we might need separate branding, a separate look and feel. And so we can support one-to-many portal options. And so our customers really like that flexibility where they might have a scenario where they might need 2 portals or 3 portals, and they're not beholden to just being stuck to making one of them work. Now, like Andrew had mentioned, conversational AI and AI in general, of course, is such a big buzzword in this space. And it's been important to us that as we've continued to add AI functionality to our tool, that we are building it with that enterprise service management methodology in mind. And so keep in mind that when you're looking at a tool, you also want any of the AI pieces, and specifically here, conversational AI, the ability not just for IT to manage or leverage or have, IT questions and tickets handled, but also being able to really understand who that user is that's interacting, support and crawl across all types of knowledge. And when we're working with enterprise groups, especially teams like human resources or legal, they oftentimes will have FAQs that are in PDFs or out on websites. And so with Team Dynamics, we're also able to look at all of those types of knowledge sources to be able to provide information. And so to give you just an example of that, I'm not authenticated into the Team Dynamics portal or into conversational AI, but I'm going to come here and I'm going to ask something that's not IT related at all. I'm just going to ask like a typical employee question, like how many days of PTO do I still have? And what conversational AI is able to do is look to see, hey, is there just some quick knowledge I can return crawling across the knowledge we're pointed to? If there's not, is there something that we've built to actually flow through somebody into a conversation? And so in this case, it's letting me know, in order for me to actually verify your PTO balance, I'm going to have you authenticate into our SSO solution. So we can seamlessly integrate there. I'm going to go ahead and sign on in. It's also nicely brought me into the portal. And in this case, we were able to integrate right on over to tools that HR is using to manage PTO balances. And so keep in mind that as you're exploring those functions, especially when it comes to integration and automation across the entire technology stack of the enterprise, looking for tools like Team Dynamics that has that full rich integration and automation capability, not just between platforms, but also when we think about supporting users through conversational AI and shifting a lot of those mundane tasks and questions back to the end user to be able to quickly resolve themselves. Now, outside of the end user experience that we offer through here, keep in mind that we can intake tickets via email. Conversational AI can live on any website. It can also be in Teams, Slack, email, SMS, a lot of variety of channels. And we also can integrate with other types of tools to automate tickets being created. Now, when we think about switching gears and coming in internally from a team member's perspective, one of the things that I want you, of course, to understand is we have the full ITSM suite of features. And I don't really think that's really truly the question here today, but more so, okay, you're a rich and robust ITSM. How do you actually work across the enterprise? And I want to give you some visuals of how we're able to make that easy for those non-IT groups to live harmoniously in a single enterprise service management solution. And one of those ways, like Sandi and Andrew had mentioned earlier, was making sure that we match nomenclature, that workflows make sense. We're not having to stick to strict IT type language. And so while here I'm logged in as somebody that is an IT agent, and this looks very familiar, I can take a look at tickets, my dashboards, I can manage assets and even integrate with other asset tools like Intune or Jamf. But when I think about that from the perspective of maybe I'm somebody in HR, I might want to have a dashboard that's hyper specific to my HR language and processes. I'm going to want to have dashboards that are purposely built around overarching processes, like in this case, recruitment and tracking the status of those. And with team dynamics, we make sure that you're not beholden by those ITIL language or jargon. And you'll notice in areas where I might want to start a new ticket, I don't have to call them that. I could call them cases or inquiries or requests because we allow you to rename those types of items in team dynamics. Now, what you'll notice is that I also, as an HR professional, have the ability to leverage things like our powerful workflow builder, because this is drag and drop, and everywhere in our admin area has been built with language that somebody doesn't have to have a deep technical prowess beforehand, but is able to easily manage the system. And so as Sandi was walking through a process earlier around onboarding, right? You have tons of different steps, lots of people involved. Not only can they manage workflows to help with things like approvals or tasks or decisions, or even reaching out to external solutions to automate things like AD group assignment, we also allow for visibility across those different teams through the different types of work that they're doing. And so what we're looking at here is what's called our workspaces view. And we've created a dedicated workspace that's focusing on all work items that are related to employee onboarding. Those could be overall tickets. Those could be ticket tasks. Those could be project tasks. And with Team Dynamics, we're flexible enough to be able to bring in all types of work that you're tracking in the tool and being able to see across that cross-functional team where exactly HR is at with their tasks, or IT, or facilities, or payroll. And this type of customization and configuring applies across all areas. And so another common group that we'll work with is facilities teams. And they're calling things work orders. Their types of assets that they're tracking are entirely different than typically what IT is tracking. And so when it comes to renaming and that nomenclature, that exists throughout the entire tool itself. Now, outside of just tracking your typical kind of one-offs or requests that you typically would within tickets, keep in mind that the project management functionality in Team Dynamics is also robust enough to support the entire enterprise by allowing you to do program and portfolio management, but also easy and simple enough to use that we often observe those non-IT groups leveraging the project management side of what we offer when it comes to things like task tracking, like you see here in this agile fashion, or even in the more deeper rigid fashion of a waterfall style, like you see here. And when we're talking with those enterprise service management groups, oftentimes they all have those longer term initiatives that they might be tracking. And so what you'll notice here is when I switch on over back to my HR professional, I can take a look at those HR projects, those longer term initiatives, and track them in the way that makes the most sense, but still stay on top of those one-offs or those, incoming requests that we handle that are more shorter term. And when we think about the kind of last biggest piece that groups are highly focused on when it comes to enterprise service management is reporting. In Team Dynamics, you can report on every single out-of-the-box field and custom field. What you also can do with that is report across all of the different areas within Team Dynamics at once, if needed, at that executive level. And so like Sandi had mentioned, it's incredibly important to have that segregation and separation of data. So, somebody in IT doesn't go see someone's HR ticket history. But when we think about reporting for metrics and KPIs, we still need to do that across the entire portfolio. And so keep in mind in Team Dynamics, through our deeper analysis features, we're able to allow you to report on all of those fields, whether it be out of the box or custom, bring those into unified views, and also allow you to wrap up all of your metrics, whether it be tracked in tickets, projects, into a single portfolio view, allowing executive leadership to really truly understand the impact that you have across the entire enterprise. And so with that, we have taken a very quick look at Team Dynamics from that enterprise service management perspective. I'm going to stop sharing and pass it right on back over to Andrew and Sandi to see if we have some time for some questions.
Thank you very much. It's a great demo.
Yeah, thanks, Kaylee. I really appreciate it. Sandy, the question came up from your perspective, where does somebody start? So, that we had that survey question that was, where are you on your journey? And a lot of people hadn't started or wanted to. What's your guidance? I mean, I gave some of my thoughts, but what do you see? What do you suggest?
Yeah, usually, I go back to the same thing we were talking about earlier, the big pain points, and there's a lot of different groups that that are looking for solutions. Quite often, what I'll hear from our customers is, we've got somebody who's looking for a specific a facilities management system. And I say, well, what are you using for your ITSM tool? Are you aware that that's an option to be able to use that tool? And, let's explore that and see if that will, meet the needs. And, and sometimes they say to me, well, we're actually in the process of changing that too. Well, let's talk about what your options are, because let's make that part of that particular project. So, so there will be questions coming in a lot of different places. And I think that the big thing is to be able to even split it up and say, okay, let's identify what some of those obvious self-serve things are, so that you can just look at, what could we put in a portal? Maybe that's the quick way. What are the things you're constantly emailing people out? Or what are the answers that you're constantly giving for those like top 5 questions? And then we can go, okay, are there 2 or 3 things that come into you regularly that we could actually say, like, this is a request type? So sometimes it's just triggering those first thoughts that gets people going. And then once they've gotten a few things where they can go, oh, here's a request, and it's just gone directly to the person that's responsible, but I can see it in case they're away, suddenly they go, what else can we do? So sometimes it's really simple starts, but it can be impactful in getting that message across.
Another interesting question came across. There's the concept of the one stop, where you have one massive portal that has all the answers, right? All the content for our organization. Then there's the concept of having departmental portals, right? What are you seeing out there? I mean, what's your guidance on that? Is there a best practice, or how would a client approach determining what the best approach is for them?
Yeah, I've seen multiple portals, and I don't love that, just because of the fact that it becomes a memory game, right? I mean, it's like my example of, well, when Dave wins the lottery and isn't doing payroll anymore, you want someone to step into that very quickly. If I forget or I don't bookmark something, I don't remember how to get there. So I think having a single portal that allows people to branch off from there is a good way to be able to have one place to go. They find everything they need. It's still separated. I can click on the HR button and it takes me into HR, but I can always click the home button and get back to that page. That's my preference.
Yeah, what we saw, this is interesting. I think the utopia is having a single one stop where everyone knows to go, and that all that content's available through AI channels, so Teams, Slack, et cetera, but it's all consolidated. And I think from a product perspective, that's where we started. Hey, everyone should have a single portal. What we found in reality is that some departments had their own portal and they didn't want to let go of it. So as a way to allow them to dip their toe or get started, we say, hey, no problem, you can have your own portal. But then what we had to do from a product perspective to meet this need was allow that content to essentially be represented in the one stop. So HR could still have their own portal, but the one stop had all their content in it. And it didn't need to be maintained in 2 places. This was a really interesting business problem that again came down to human behavior. And if people were already going to the HR portal, you didn't want to have to retrain them to go to the one stop. And so that was a dynamic that we had to overcome, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, something to that effect. So kind of interesting. But I agree. I think the ideal is you have a single place where most of your knowledge resides and gets curated, et cetera. I think we're finding
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah, and I've also found with some will say, well, we already have some of this in our HRIS system, but there's a lot of things that HR does that isn't necessarily easy to build in HRIS, and there's also some things that people may want to put their information in, like a name change, and being able to do that in a place where HR can verify that the documentation is correct before they let it go into the HRIS system, that's kind of a nice thing to have. So there are a lot of areas that even if they have their own portal, maybe there's still gaps that they could use this as a way to fill some of those gaps too.
Great. Well, I think, Sandy, we are at time.
Oh, that happened quick.
It did, didn't it? Well, thank you so much. Really, really, thank you so much for having us and including us in the presentation. Always, always.
Absolutely.